Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in today, wherever you are in the world and whatever time that may be. My name's Nathan McGill and I'm a student, recent graduate from Birmingham City University. Today we're launching our very first Industry Insights event, which we're hosting in line with our Graduate Photography Showcase. If you've been keeping up to date with all things Unmute Photo, you'll be aware we've been working on a digital auction, a launch of our website, an upcoming publication, and today we begin our Industry Insights events. So for our first event, I will be in conversation with two fantastic photographers, Max Miechowski and Chris Hoare. And yeah, so to introduce both, we've got Max Miechowski here, who is a British photographer based in London, whose practice is rooted in portraiture, but is also very familiar in capturing the beauty of place and how people and place influence one another. Max's photography centres themes of community and connection and has been exhibited internationally. In both 2018 and 2020, he's been included in the Creative Review Photography Annual and has had consecutive winning images in British Journal of Photography's Portrait of Britain. Chris Hoare is a Bristol-based photographer who has recently completed an MA in photography at University West of England. His bodies of work are influenced by the overlooked areas of society in which he explores themes of identity and place. Chris is increasingly drawn to speculative documentary and excited by the possibilities of telling visual stories in a loose metaphorical way. In 2017, he was a finalist for British Journal of Photography's Portrait of Britain and is also a 2/3, maybe 3, time finalist for the Palm Photo Prize. Chris has been featured in numerous publications such as The Guardian, British Journal of Photography and Port Magazine, and has recently had his first published book, Growing Spaces. So congratulations on your new book, Chris, and congratulations to you, Max, on your recent Palm Photo Prize success. That's like
Thank you.
Insane, both of you, just like amazing work, which actually I'm really inspired by both of you. And I feel like, I don't know if you guys feel this, but when I look at both your work, I kind of see like, kind of like a similarity. I don't know if it's in the aesthetic or the connection, but there's just something similar to me about your work. And I don't know, it's just something like really nice. Maybe the color palettes, the choice of your focus. I'm not too sure.
I'm a fan of Max's work, so that's a compliment, a really nice compliment to him. So.
Yeah, likewise. And yeah, thank you for having us here for the talk and stuff. I think it should be really exciting. So
wicked. So we're going to be discussing visual storytelling today. So yeah, I'd just like to thank you both for joining us initially anyway, for taking your time to join me for our Industry Insights event. It's, you know, I'm really appreciative for you both doing this. Is there anything that you wish to add to your introductions before we go?
You summed it up, dude.
Yeah, you summed it up.
That's great.
Nice. Wicked, okay.
It's always funny listening to someone else say that stuff, you know? So yeah, it's kind of, you like write these things out or someone else writes them, and then to hear someone say it back is kind of a strange experience.
Yeah. It makes you think, oh, I might need to rewrite mine again, or just, if it's going to be read out.
Cool. Before
it always seems more humble in text, you know, than in, I don't know, when it's verbally spoken, it always seems a little bit like boasting, you know?
Yeah. Cool. Before I jump into questions about photography and storytelling, I just want to ask you both, how have you found working in photography during this pandemic, being in the industry?
Want to go first, Max? You go first.
Yeah, sure. Like, obviously it's been like a super weird year. And I found generally it's been, in terms of making work, personal work anyway, I found that it's been really up and down throughout the whole year. And I've strangely found that I've had weird spurts of inspiration and have felt like strangely very excited, and have gone through these sort of, albeit very short, moments of just taking a lot of pictures and just having this sort of like flurry of inspiration, and then having longer periods of time where I haven't really felt inspired and felt, I guess, just kind of like, confused about how best to respond to the situation. And that's been really difficult. And I found it multiple times throughout the year of just going, getting into you just get yourself tangled up a little bit in your thinking about your own work and about how to approach it. And I think that to come from, the previous normal experience before the pandemic, and to feel like maybe you're on a thought process or a track with your work, and then to have that completely disrupted, has been kind of confusing, and quite strange. But I've found it's been useful for me to experiment a lot with shooting. So I've been shooting a lot of digital work rather than shooting on film, which has kind of been interesting, and going through processes just like, having a week at a time of just photographing every day, just anything and everything, and really kind of having these obsessive periods and just, just seeing sort of what comes out of it. And then, just really reflecting, I guess, a little bit on like how to respond to the year, how to respond to the experience, but then also trying to think ahead a little bit and using this time to reflect and be like, okay, well, if we've got this time now to like consider what it is that's important or that we care about or where we want to see our practice go, do you know what I mean? It's like, like now's the time to think about that, and to sink into that a little bit. So it's been, a period of reflection, and then like manic depressive photographing of like spurts of craziness, and then longer spurts of just nothing. So I don't know about you, Chris, if you've had a similar thing.
I think honestly, really, really similar actually, to be honest with you. Yeah, I mean, reflection being the key word. I think, it's been, to think from, the beginning up until now, how much has sort of, it's been up and down. And, at the very beginning, it was, it was like an equalizer, wasn't it? It just stopped everyone in their tracks. And obviously there were sort of negative things about that, but there was positive things about it in terms of giving you the time to like just pause and think about what you're doing. And I think, I think with also like the work that we do, dealing with people, I think you're the same way, you sort of approach people on the street at times. I think that thing had to be sort of put on hold a little bit at points. Because of the nature of what we've been doing, and so that's been just dealing with people has been kind of different. But I mean, I guess I was quite fortunate in a sense to get have a commission. I don't even really have a great deal of commissions, but I had one that was kind of substantial, and that was photographing allotments throughout the course of 2020. So I feel very sort of lucky to have had that opportunity where it was, it was outdoors and it was safe and it was, allowed to sort of make a body of work. But all my other sorts of work that I do alongside it, I sort of paused a little bit. And then it just, I don't know, now it's, makes you think about what, our work and what you want to do with it. And, exhibitions and stuff just feel even more exciting now. You don't just want your work to exist just online, and I think any sort of physical interaction with photography now I think becomes even more precious and even more something that I want to sort of drive towards even more. But it's been it's been up and down, man, you have those times when you're like, this is a bit shit, but then, and then things, but then, when things start opening up, and that manicness of like trying to respond in some way to this thing, but not you don't necessarily want to make a pandemic project, but I think everything you do around this time, there's some sort of connotation, there's a relationship with the bigger picture, whether it be just a portrait of someone on the street, there's a relationship to their surroundings and what's happening, and then masks, you end up with a few portraits of people with masks, which I kind of embrace in a way, that because in time they're gonna, hopefully, you can look back and be like, oh, people were wearing masks. So
I think I think it's interesting, just not to go off on too much of a tangent on that, but just the idea of the mask, you know, like within an image, you know, and for me, and actually, like, I've kind of stuck to it really, just not really photographing anyone in a mask, or not having a mask in anything, you know, in any of the images. And I think it's interesting because, like, some people have really, you know, I've seen a lot of photographers who've really sort of gone into that, you know, and they very much kind of like documented the time, and like that as a visual kind of metaphor. Well, not even a metaphor, you know, reality of the times. And then other people who seem to have completely avoided it. And I definitely have felt much more in the second camp, you know, of completely avoiding it. And I wonder whether it's about, you know, I feel like with your work in particular, it's particularly difficult to place in time, and you know, and there's like a timeless quality to a lot of your images. You know, they could have happened yesterday, they could have happened maybe 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, or something. And I know you like to work with metaphor and ambiguity, like within narrative, you know, within storytelling. And I feel a little bit like that. The mask is just a little bit, it's on the nose, you know, it's like right here, right now, this time. And it's like, for me, like, it's difficult for me to have something in the image that grounds it so precisely to the present, because I'm much more attracted to things that maybe feel a little more ambiguous in terms of time. And for the narrative to feel a little more maybe interpretive or whatever, you know. And I wonder if that is just the kind of, yeah, but that's a reason why people want to avoid it, you know.
Yeah, no, I think I do feel the same. Like, I think, you know, as you said, a lot of photographers have really embraced it, and sort of almost, you know, what binds a body of work for some people together is it being in the pandemic. I think just one of those things. So I think I've taken a few pictures where consequently, like, I haven't even noticed they've had a mask on. Do you know what I mean? Because you're so used to it. Like, I think when it's over your face, you know, you over someone's face, like, so obvious, but usually it's just, you know, it's tucked under your chin.
Yeah.
Basically.
Funny, that idea just it's just like blending into the background now, you know, like it's just this normal thing to have a mask there, you know.
Sure.
Cool. I think that's really interesting about the mask, like the idea, like you want to avoid the mask in imagery, in photography, and I think that's because it literally, it's documenting the moment as its reality, essentially. And I suppose you wanting to avoid that. I suppose you don't want to show the reality of the pandemic. You want to, like you said, you want something more ambiguous, or maybe something more mysterious. Because when you see the mask, you're instantly gonna, it's gonna have those connotations of the pandemic. That's all people are gonna associate with the mask now. So I suppose when you see a mask in an image, it's gonna override everything else. If you're trying to like narrate or tell a story about something else, if seeing a mask, or if your subject, the model, is wearing a mask, it's going to like instantly override everything else that you're trying to convey. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting concept.
It might be interesting to see how those images age, you know, like over a longer period of time. And it might be something for me that I regret, you know, not doing that, because it's so in your face right now. It's almost difficult to take a step back from it and look at it, you know, with a different perspective, you know. And then, you know, in 30, 40 years or 50 years or whatever, it might be really beautiful to see those images in with the masks, you know. And it's just this very poignant visual link to like this period in our lives, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I think like very historical, like archival kind of imagery you could get from those masked images. Yeah, for sure. My next question is, how did you both get introduced to photography? When did that journey with photography begin for you guys?
Yeah, I don't mind going first. It's just really incredibly cliche, really. Like after school I studied art and design. I really didn't know what else to really study, and when I studied art, there was a photography module, and as soon as I did that photography module, I was kind of let into a dark room, and the photography department was just kind of a really special atmosphere where the teachers were just amazing, you know, like really sort of, you know, showing. It's my first introduction to sort of photo books and a dark room. And literally, you know, it's, as I said, it's cliche. Like I haven't really ever considered anything since then. And I was probably like 17 at that point. So, and it's just straightforward from then. And ever since then, I've been sort of battling away at trying to kind of, and enjoying it. And, you know, it's given me purpose. And I was never ever really shown any. I've never shown photography or art growing up, really. I never went to exhibitions when I was a kid, really. So my exposure to things like that was never really, I was just never really shown it. So as soon as I was shown it, I sort of gravitated towards it because it felt so special. And I think, the teachers were, I think everyone, most people with photography, there's been like a teacher or someone sort of almost shown you the light in a way. And for me, it was like that. It was, special sort of teachers, really. Yeah.
For me, it was kind of a weird one because I didn't get into photography until a little bit later. So I was 25 when I first kind of had an experience with photography. And prior to that, I had just been obsessed with music and making music from when I was 15. And that was kind of my first like real creative thing, you know, that I just became very obsessive about. And I did that for 10 years, kind of very seriously, and was working as a musician and as a music teacher. And then basically got a camera to like start doing videos or pictures that were relating directly to music or the bands I was playing in. This idea of creating like content, you know, was just this like, okay, it's like get a camera, do some stuff or whatever. And then it was like, whilst I was doing that, we actually like this urban exploration thing, you know, like urbex.com or whatever it was this, someone introduced me to that. So we kind of started doing this thing where we started like, you know, trespassing or whatever, and getting into these big abandoned buildings and making images of that. And then, you know, the images that you see of people doing that, they're like these intense, like HDR, you know, they're just like,
they're not on your website then, man.
No, they're horrible, you know, they're so horrible. But that was just super exciting to me, was this realization that like to have the camera was this excuse to get into these places or whatever. It's like an excuse to like look behind the door and to go somewhere you would never normally go. And then basically I went backpacking for a while with some friends and took my camera there. And then whilst I was on that trip specifically, like I really like just totally fell in love with it. And then, decided that I wanted to do that instead of doing music. And just kind of I came back to England and then did the first year of a photography course because I'd never done a degree before. So felt like a good opportunity to do it. So I went as a mature student, which was an adventure. And that was it really. Just so around 25, just got really into it, and just been pretty obsessed with it really since then. So
that's it's interesting you say traveling as well, because I remember I went traveling when I was young as well, around that same time as sort of discovering photography, and I went with some friends around Europe for like 5 weeks or so, and photography was such a big part of that trip, about like learning about photographing and I guess, you know, because you're so excited about your surroundings and you're sort of, it's a way of engaging with it. But it like helps kind of, especially at the beginning of photography, to sort of be photographing new things. It's like super.
I think it happens quite a lot. Like I hear that like travel story, you know, for like a lot of people. And, you know, I think when you're younger and when you haven't like delved much into the photo book world and stuff, you know, National Geographic and things like that, for a lot of people is sort of the only accessible, so, you know, that's the sort of stuff you see first, you know, and all these like travel photography 101 books or whatever. It's like, that's what you see. It's like, you know, you don't start with like a Diane Arbus book, you know, some people do or whatever, but, and I think the thing for travel for me, and it's something that I'm still, you know, really inspired by and obviously want to do, as does everyone, you know, it was very similar even to that urban exploration thing, really, where it's just about nurturing curiosity, you know, and it's about going somewhere new, going somewhere fresh, using the camera as an excuse and like as a tool to like propel that curiosity. Do you know what I mean? To go down that street you wouldn't go down, to go, you know, to go to a particular place at a particular time to catch a good light or whatever. It's like you're instantly just engaging like with the world, you know. And yeah, I think if you're not curious about the world in that sense, it's like there's no way you're going to take a good picture, you know. It's just not possible without curiosity.
That's the best thing about it, isn't it? It's like, yeah, as you said, going down that street, going to just really random, obscure places, but being so interested because you never know what is going to be around that corner or who you're going to see. And it gives you an excuse to go and approach someone and just like, yeah, that curiosity. And I think like, yeah, the more longer you do photography, like what we do, I guess, yeah, you really nurture that, don't you? And you really allow that to sort of thrive within yourself, just exploring on a really basic level, just exploring with photography.
Yeah, and I see what both of us do very much as like an extension of that, is like this refined version of that kind of initial experience. You know, it's like if you keep going, like it starts to lead. You want to discover something more mysterious or more metaphorical or whatever. You know, it's still an extension of that curiosity, but it exists like in a physical space still, but it also then starts to exist within like a psychological and like theoretical space where it's like, okay, like, so your curiosity continues to lead you down that path as well, in ways of like thinking about photography and engaging with photography. So it's like all of these doors, both in like physical and like psychological space, like keep opening and moving and shifting and changing, you know. It's like, yeah, it's similar.
Yeah, it makes you even more interested about, you know, queuing yourself up on knowledge about the world as well. I think when I first started photography, I don't think I really knew much about the world. And even when I did my BA, I think I was, you know, quite naive when I did it. And then I think like that, after that, that's when it's like, you know, because of being interested in documentary and stories and people, it just gives you an extra incentive, and it allows you to enjoy reading about the world and kind of, you know, yeah, equipping yourself with more kind of knowledge, because then that just feeds into your images and it feeds into your understanding of the world, and they sort of then play together. I think like the sort of knowledge you acquire, but then also the real basicness of walking with a camera and discovering things. I think for me, I think that sort of has kind of happened, really.
That's something I've found this year in particular, and also, you know, I don't know whether it's also like a sign of age or whatever, but like just this real like thirst for like knowledge now in a way that I just didn't really have it before. It would be like, okay, music, I want to learn everything about music. Photography, I want to learn everything about photography. And now it's just starting to be like, you know, history or philosophy or poetry or writing, you know, just anything, you know. I think like, you know, that curiosity just keeps expanding, and I can't get enough of everything now. Do you know what I mean? I want to learn more about the world.
In your head, does that then, are you relating it to your photography? Like, are you relating it to?
I think it's about just gathering all of that stuff together, you know, and then letting it play out subconsciously, you know, as much as possible. But
cool. So my next question for you both is, how do you define visual storytelling? So what does visual storytelling mean to you?
Yeah, do you want to go first on this one, Max?
Yeah, I can do. Like, I think it's you know, it's quite a difficult one to answer in some ways, you know. And as we said, like when we first logged into the chat, like it's got me thinking quite a lot over the past few days about about visual storytelling, but specifically like in relation to storytelling, like in general, you know. But in relation to photography, I think it's very complicated because there are so many different approaches and so many different ways of doing it. You know, I think it's hard to define like one, you know, what visual storytelling is like in that sense, because there's, you know, there's work that's extremely, you know, objective, well, attempting to be some sort of objectivity, like within photojournalism or whatever, you know, that we take as kind of news photography, you know. And then there's people working with kind of like much more abstract approaches or much more metaphorical approaches, which still very much are, you know, it's still visual storytelling, but it's like those two things they're just worlds apart, you know, and they just exist in like a totally different space. So
I think that there's so many different approaches that people are taking, and I think things for me always kind of center around the word documentary, but then, you know, documentary is an incredibly like expansive term that can be, you know, it doesn't mean that you're trying to be objective with your images. I think it's, you know, it's telling stories in a, you know, sequence. It's about sort of provoking feelings with your images, but using the real world light also, that's for me always something quite important. I mean, everything is, you know, staged to a degree, you know. I'm not against like moving something around or whatever. It's about playing with the world, but kind of creating something with the world and real people, and tackling sort of different themes. And you're tackling different themes whereby you can't really do that in one image or two images. You need a whole sequence of images. And if you're going to have a sequence, you may as well, you sort of kind of want it to be a book, because it's such a nice way for that kind of sequence of images to be read. Because even then, you know, it's about the sort of gaps in between and how you structure that. For me, that's visual storytelling with photography. But again, I think like Max's work, you know, like myself, and I think that, you know, there's a number of other people working in this, you know, it's an expansive way, but a similar way in terms of, you know, it is about feeling, isn't it? It's about kind of, you know, playing with aesthetics, but real world, and people are just infinitely interesting and beautiful, and it's playing with those, to kind of playing with all of these elements to sort of, to show something, you know, to show something to someone, to show something to the world, that you hope hasn't sort of been shown before, basically.
I think it's really interesting within photography, and just like how, you know, how we were talking about kind of our initial interest or whatever, our initial kind of like way into photography. And I think that like photography works in a really interesting way, where it's like it can be extremely loose in terms of, you know, in terms of the approach and in terms of really sort of what's happening. But then it needs, you know, I think where the storytelling element comes in is about forcing some sort of parameters within those images, and defining what the parameters of the story are, you know. Because, you know, me and you, like we're going out into the world and we're making images, right? And like personally, you know, I'm working often within like defined geographical locations, and I define that before I go and shoot, but with no other intention about what the story is. And for me, that's just a way to get out the door, you know. And it's a super easy technique, you know, and loads of people work in this way, and place is such a common thing that photographers say that, you know, they're exploring place, right? And it's like, it's because it's kind of, in many ways, it's the easiest thing to start doing within photography. It's like you pick a place, you go there, and you just make a lot of images within those like geographical parameters. And I think that it's useful to define parameters then for yourself, but then by the time you work through making those images, allowing those parameters to shift and move as you're thinking whilst you're making images, And then for the parameters to be very different almost on the other side, for the viewer, you know, like the viewer needs parameters. They need like an inroad to the story, you know. They need like some sort of hook that's going to pull them into that, you know. And I think there are obviously loads of different ways that you can do that. And I think a really interesting one actually is a title. You know, a title for a project, I think, can be like a really beautiful inroad to set a certain tone, or to give a viewer access, like an immediate access to the images and to what's happening. And with your project in Australia, man, it's like, it's the greatest title ever.
It's a funny title, yeah. It's a bit bold, but it kind of came together with, it's a weird title.
It's so lovely and ambiguous, you know, but like just so nice, and it's like tragic, but like poetic and beautiful, and you know, it's such a great title, and I think that is like so useful for a viewer to have that, you know. It's like in many ways that is the inroad, isn't it? It's like that's the door opening into the work, and then through that it's like you can deal in more ambiguous ways, or you can push it into different spaces, you know, or latch more closely onto a certain narrative or whatever. But somehow for me, like, kind of sets some sort of foundation somehow, you know.
Yeah, no, I agree massively. Like, it's funny, titles can be sometimes the hardest thing they can be really hard to come up with, but you know, when you hear, when they appear, like, and they just stick, and you sort of like that sort of it. And sometimes that can be at the beginning of the project, or it can be a little bit along. I think having those and again, geography and having parameters just to get out the house, or to, because you don't, I just think when making images, I mean, everyone does things differently, but I just don't want to make images completely randomly. What helps me get out the house is a location or a title, or these parameters, because then I'm like, oh right, I'm responding to those things, and in my head it allows me to connect the dots better. But as particularly title is and for the viewer, it really helps them kind of think about use that title when they're looking at the work. It sort of gels things together, I think. But I can completely, all the things you said are like very similar to myself, really.
I think it's super interesting, like working in this sort of ambiguous way, you know, just working in place or whatever, defining a place and making work there. And then like it's so interesting to see how like a story pulls out of that place, that it's like you previously, like, there's no way you can plan for that. You can't like Google like, oh, what's a cool story like to do in London, or, you know what I mean, like, what's an exciting newsworthy story. It's like you'll always come up with nothing. It's just like or it'll be something that's been done, or something that's just like unoriginal and like lacks subtlety, you know. Whereas I think if you just go and allow that story to sort of present itself somehow through returning time and time again to a place, it always is surprising, you know, and always like, and that's really exciting, because it's, like I said, it's nothing that I could have planned. But then so having then this sort of like allowing the narrative then to come through, and then using that narrative then as like a further inroad for like a viewer, you know. So it's like, if someone's going to publish your work or whatever, it's like that there needs to be like an inroad. It's like, what's the story, you know? And it's like, it's very difficult to be like, oh, well, the story is all about like this deep philosophical, it's all about like deep time and like psychological space, or like, it's fine. Like, a lot of people work in that way now. But for me, it's like, okay, like, it's not enough of an inroad, you know. And it's like, some people are extremely successful working in that way. But like, you know, you want to get as many people into the story. You want to tell people about the story, right? So it's like if you have like a very simple, like one line thing, like this is what the project's about, and then you allow the images to communicate everything that's deeper than that, like allow the images then to communicate the psychological considerations that you're having, or whatever else it might be. But I think without the title, and then without that one line of like, what is this project about, to have that access, for me all the other stuff starts to fall apart. And it doesn't have a strong enough foundation on which to function.
No, I'm the same way. Yeah, there has to be a hook. There has to be some sort of hook, or again, storytelling. Like there has to be a story of sorts, even if that story sort of becomes very nuanced and like reflected in the images in lots of different ways. Like there has to be that sort of line, or has to be about something for me. Just like yourself, really.
Cool. What was that Australian project that you were talking about? What's that one called?
It's called The Worst Poem in the Universe, basically. And the title itself actually came quite it came later on. I made a number of trips to Australia, and it's sort of, the project developed with every trip. It sort of developed. Like one of those trips, I was there for a whole year, and the worst poem in the universe was essentially, the project's all about luck, good luck and bad luck, and Australia's relationship to luck, where there's kind of all these kind of weird, interesting sort of things, such as they're as a nation, they're the biggest gamblers in the world, and that's does that mean they're lucky or unlucky, or and all these different, there was all these different things that were adding up. And also there was a book written called The Lucky Country by an Australian author in the 60s, and it was actually meant ironically. So I read that book quite early on, and imagine this book called The Lucky Country, and it's completely ironic, basically. And then since then, that phrase lucky country is like a term in Australia, the way they sort of some people sort of describe their country. And then the richest person in Australia is a lady called Gina Reinhardt, who's a sort of mining magnate who sells sort of iron ore. She's incredibly rich, and she wrote a poem, and then the poem was described as the worst poem in the universe. And then it just tied to, it's funny, it just tied together, and I don't know, in my head it sort of fixed things together, because then it's kind of ambiguous enough. But it was funny when it was with a friend, and when I sort of first said it, I don't know, it clicked. At first I was like, is that a little bit too mad for a title? But then it sort of worked, and then it sort of just worked in the end, I think, and it sort of grew on me quite quickly. So I'm glad that you like it, Max, because I still question it sometimes.
No, it's really good, and I think it's very difficult coming up with titles. And I've spoken a lot about this to people, and everyone kind of struggles with it. And I've been working on something this year, and I'm still kind of figuring out what it is and piecing it together, a little bit. And I just can't get the title, and it's really like, it's winding me up like something rotten, like I just can't. I'm just like, oh, I need that, and then that will piece it together, because I'm kind of dealing like with this thing that's very much rooted in like a accessible story, but then it's like all these kind of deeper like philosophical layers and considerations that, for me, the title needs to be hitting at all of those. It needs to somehow hit that accessible point, and then like allude to like all this deeper stuff, and it's difficult.
But then it will come, like they do that, like they sort of come. Sometimes they come from like, where you don't really expect them to come.
I think that's when it's finished sometimes, for me anyway. I'm hoping that by the time its title comes, it'll be, you can put something to bed a little bit. It's kind of like the icing on the cake. It's like, hey, like it's there,
It can be at the start or at the end. Like that's what's like really interesting. I think Alec both talked a lot about titles and how he finds it incredibly useful to have it at the beginning. And at that stage, I hadn't had like a project where I'd had a title at the beginning, so I sort of disagree. But and then now I'm working on a project, and I've basically had the title since the beginning, which is really like unusual for me, really.
It's interesting how that changes the making of the work potentially. Like it's
it makes it a little bit easier. not easier, but it just gives you an extra like little thing to respond to, like an extra idea. Like, I mean, like in the project that I'm doing, it's called 7 Hills. So I've got 2 words there, like 7. So if I see something where there's like 7, I'm like, I'm like, shit, I better photograph that.
Yeah.
And then also trying to photograph a hill, which is really difficult. Trying to kind of somehow tie those into it, which I always like it when a project has, I guess like Alex Sose was Sleeping by the Mississippi, and then he's got mattresses in it, and it's quite nice when you sort of see echoes of the title within the project.
Yeah, and I mean that's that's such a beautiful title, like Sleeping by the Mississippi, and obviously the work is incredible, but it would be interesting to know how that project would have rolled out if it had a really bad title. If they just couldn't get the title, it's like would it have been so influential? Like, who knows? It's like the title is just so good, it just draws you in.
Yeah, it works, doesn't it?
Yeah, I agree. Going back to what you were saying about, like title all the way back, it is the inroad. It is like, it is the inroad to the narrative of the project. It's the first thing that a reader's gonna see probably. So the title kind of like not gives everything away, but it gives an insight into what is to come within the images. It'd be great to see that project you were just talking about. Do you want to screen share, Chris, or maybe just
if
see
you want me to do it, I can go through maybe what one, the Australia one?
Yeah, or any particular project that where storytelling was like a key aspect. That'd be cool.
Maybe because what I'll do then, maybe I'll show the Australia one, but I'll just quickly go through it, and then maybe at any point we can like keep talking or change the topic, or I don't know what the best way to do it, but
it's just nice. I suppose it's just nice to just look and glance at the images, to be honest.
How did you find working with color and black and white, like for this project? And I know sometimes it almost seems like this most basic of questions, but it can be a really difficult thing to do, and to weave them together like seamlessly,
Yeah, no, it's like, it's funny, and it is a simple question, but it's one that you really have to make a decision on, isn't it? And like with each project, like this one, I made the decision really early on, and then just really kind of embraced it, and enjoyed it. But then putting it together, it becomes certainly more difficult. So this is like essentially the sort of PDF for the book that I was gonna try and self-publish the book before the pandemic happened, and everything's on pause, blah blah blah. But so I ended up doing it in it's sort of sections of color and sections of black and white, but then sort of in a way trying to in some way echo the ideas behind the project with the color and black and white, but that's difficult because really, I mean, I'm sort of photographing in exactly the same things in color and black and white, but then I could imagine, Max, like, I don't know, because you sort of work in black and white and color, don't you? And I think, like, I don't know, are you, for your new project, are you working in color or black and white or both?
I'm trying to mix them up. For me, black and white is like a new thing, like I was very much drawn to to color for a long time, and then I think there's something really beautiful when they're mixed together, like something really interesting starts happening. And I think that thinking about a book or thinking about longer sequences, or I think just like keeping the viewer interested and being able to sort of like, I think like speaking about storytelling, this idea of creating pace, or just opportunities to breathe, for the viewer to breathe or catch their breath, or for something to feel surprising or different as It's something really, you can use it really like in a powerful way, I think, as a tool to kind of switch between the two, to keep like the momentum going in some ways.
Yeah, I remember the one person that really sort of in my head sort of almost made me want to do black and white and color with this particular project was Tom Wood. So, like, Tom Wood's books, like obviously he just shoots different formats, color, black and white, everything. But there's something, I think, like there's something about embracing that, like and they can work really well together, I think, like, and it does something, like you said, it does something different, and it can change the tone, it can change the pace, and I think just it's just a shame, isn't it? I mean, the new project I'm doing is just color, but it started color, black and white, and then I just like really sort of almost begrudgingly like let go of black and white. But I think it's each project is like different, isn't it? Don't you think?
Yeah, for sure, man. And I think it's just a continual, it's again, it's what we're talking about with curiosity earlier. It's just about, these opportunities all the time to just see what happens when you introduce a little bit of a new approach, or, what happens when you mix things up and do this or do that, or use a new piece of equipment, or, it's all about just kind of discovering something new and different ways of telling stories, I think some people feel very set on like a particular style or whatever, and they're like, I only shoot black and white forever and ever. And and I'm like, okay, like it's cool. It creates this sort of consistency throughout your like wider body of work. But I just don't see where the fun is in that, because it's good to be pulled out of your comfort zone, to be put into a different space where it's like, okay, well, let's just mix things up a little bit, because I think it can be quite easy after you've done it for a long time, and you see it happen with a lot of people, they become uninspired, and it's like the trick with this is just to like keep this momentum going, keep kind of, flipping over rocks and stuff, and keep looking in new places and just see what happens, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, and that you just navigate from there,
Yeah. I think, like sometimes, you just have to switch things up, and whether that, like black and white, to let go of black and white would just be like, I almost like now, because this project's going to be, the next one's in color, like the next one after that, I'm shooting black and white, because it's just, really, I don't know, there's something about it. But I think in terms of switching things up, sometimes that can be a new camera as well. Like I was shooting square for so long, and I haven't picked up, I haven't even picked up my Hasselblad in ages, but, and then it was really, and I don't know, I was shooting in one way, and then I just switched camera, and then it just things become more exciting in a different way, and I'm sort of, I would happily, if I felt like that again, I would just switch camera again, or trying to find a different technique, or I think you should definitely like be trying to like evolve and not be afraid to sort of jump out of your comfort zone.
Like if, for me, like if my work looks the same in like 20 years time, like something's gone horribly wrong, it's like, even if the narrative is developing, I don't know, it's just like, it just doesn't seem exciting, it's like, I think you want to be like uncovering, covering new ground all the time, and just feel like a little bit of a progression, or at least to experiment,
Yeah, definitely.
These are all analog.
Yeah, so they're all six.
Yeah, can tell. So good. I love the just the combination of the black and white and the color. It's just, rather than everything all in one, it's just nice, the combination together in like one book as well.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I just think, you just got, if you feel something feels right, like, oh, I'm going to shoot it in color and black and white, like there should be no rules really, like, and I think definitely there, a lot of people would be like, oh, I wouldn't mix color and black and white, or there's just never should be any rules, should there really,
For sure.
I'll stop sharing. Should I stop sharing screen?
Yeah, sure. It'd be great to see a project of yours, Max. Do you have a particular project that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, I just put a little PDF together with a couple of bits of work that I can kind of talk through.
Nice.
You guys can see this, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see your screen. Yeah.
Where are we? Oh, here we go. The bar is hiding my
Oh
the
yeah.
PDF. There we go. So yeah, I mean, you can see that this is all good, yeah? It's a blank page. But...
Yeah, blank
yeah.
page, yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, just to go through, I guess, kind of a couple of projects that have been kind of important to me over the past couple of years. This was the first one, and this was like the result of spending a lot of time shooting in Southeast London, which was a really great experience, and just working with that as a geographical location. It was the place I'd moved to, and really started just kind of exploring, really working out from the house that I was living in, you know, street by street by street, and expanding that geographical location, and just sort of seeing what happens, really, doing street portraits, photographing everything around me. You know, in some ways, you know, I guess in some ways it's sort of this autobiographical approach. It's something that I was doing in Leeds when I was living in Leeds, of just working very closely with the people who live around me. You know, that's sort of the initial starting point. And then this work kind of expanded into focusing specifically on the park that was very close to my house. And it was shot in the summer of 2018, which was just like insane weather. Like, it was the World Cup was on. It was just like, we had like a 3-month heat wave, and it was just like, you know, it was just a good vibe, man. And like, I ended up just spending a lot of time within this space, and just making a lot of images of all the people there, you know. And for me, it felt really exciting. I'd not been in London for too long, and, you know, to be surrounded by a lot of people from the local community, literally like dancing and having a good time, and just, you know, not to be too gushy about it, but just kind of celebrating life, you know. And there would regularly be like sound systems that were set up on the park, and people having barbecues and birthday parties and all the rest of it, you know. And it was just a case of being there, getting to know a lot of people, photographing them, sometimes re-photographing them, and then basically sending every single person a print, you know. And that was just sort of, for me, was just a way to sort of somehow feel a little bit involved within the community, and for me to try and engage with these people, yeah, in some sort of tangible way, you know. And it was just a case really of spending a lot of time there, you know, in this quite a small space, and trying somehow to get a little bit of that feeling that I was experiencing, which was really just one of like inspiration. And, you know, I felt very kind of connected to everyone that was living around me. Yeah, and it was just a good experience, you know.
Oh, Matt, sorry to interrupt you. Like, how did you find it photographing in like a park as opposed to sort of on a street or something? Did you find it sort of slightly different in terms of the sort of, you know, it's sort of quite open and having a camera? Did you find any sort of difficulties with that?
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, I mean, for me, it was very much, you know, focusing on the people, you know, within the space. And I think that was a way, you know, that was the way to sort of bring the narrative out of that, you know. And I think now, thinking about how you can photograph a park, you know, that's something, it's so simple and it's so accessible and so everyday, and to turn it into something that feels beyond the everyday, you know, it feels like much more than the park that you see and spend time in, you know. You know, like, it is difficult, but it was about focusing, I think, immediately on the people, you know, and their kind of individual experience. and for me, it quite easily became, it became about, individual experience in relation to collective experience, and how ultimately it's like, we're social creatures, and the way that we exist and interact with each other is very much within communities, large and small, and the way that we kind of make sense of the world and make sense of our own experiences through the other people that are surrounding us, and culturally, societally, that is what basically informs our sense of individual identity. So this became really interesting to me, and this was what the work really ended up being about, was using the park really as a metaphor for like a communal space. I mean, it literally is a communal space. But then the idea of exploring sort of the individual experience versus the collective experience, and how those things kind of influence one another, and how by being there as an individual, you're contributing to the collective experience, and how the collective experience is essentially informing your sense of personal identity. And then it was a case of kind of interspersing this with plant life and things that were growing around the park as well.
I think it's so cool how a park, which, a space which people, you just naturally walk through a park all the time. There's parks everywhere where you live. It's crazy. It's just so cool how like this park, and it was like such a tool to make a project feel like an entire project. I think that's so interesting.
I think it's been funny because I mean, that's like often like how I've been trying to work within the projects, is pick something that is immediately accessible and relatable, and then trying to show something that is beyond that, and I think this is so much of like how we experience the world, is everything appears normal and everyday and boring, and it's things that we're used to, and we recognize these experiences, and we have names for them, and we just put them into a category, and it's like, well, yeah, that's just like an everyday normal experience, but it's this idea of trying to use something like that and actually show that beyond that is a lot of beauty, and a lot of just a phenomenal experience, just like being here on the planet, with other people as an individual, like, how, for me, it's about me. Do you know what I mean? It's like my perspective, my universe is like from my individual experience, and everyone else is having that individual experience, And it's just this idea of trying to connect with other human beings that are having like the same experience, but from their own kind of unique perspective, So it's very much about this interaction between me and the other person. And I guess in some ways just looking at each other and recognizing each other like in that moment, and for it to somehow be a doorway into considering this individual person's life. But then how that individual life has been potentially influenced and affected by a communal experience and cultural influences, and how we are continually being shaped by our environment and our surroundings, and that relates to a natural environment, but it also relates, like I said, to a cultural environment. Who we think we are is based very much on the country we live in, the place we're born, the people we have around us, the language we speak. That's how we are interpreting the universe, is through a particular language that we're, that we're taught from birth, So yeah, it's just trying to find something that's, it's very easy and very simple and accessible, but hopefully there's this sort of like deeper meaning and deeper thought process like within the work,
Okay. I'm so sorry to cut you off, Max. We're running out of time.
No worries.
But it's
I'm
so
at the end now, so.
to see your work. But yeah, it's been amazing talking to you guys and hearing your thoughts. and experiences on visual storytelling. And I'm sure that it will be, this talk, a bit over 30 minutes, just a bit, will be beneficial for my cohort and anyone else that watches it as well. So yeah, I'd just like to thank you so much for taking the time to join me today, both of you, for this talk and sharing your work.
Thank you, Nathan. And thank you, Chris, man. It's super good to see you work and finally get a chance to chat. So
you too, man. Honestly, like, yeah, really nice to even just see then. And yeah,